Very good. Welcome, everybody. I'll see if I can get my other folks to join me on the cameras if they choose to. But welcome, everyone. Thank you guys for joining us for this 30 West IP webcast update. Today is November 21, 2024. So if you guys are viewing this at a later date, just know that some of the material may have changed. So you might want to confirm that this is still accurate. But it's been a little while since we've seen you, so welcome back. Thank you guys for joining us for this one. Today we're going to take a review, just start off with a review of the upcoming NAT Oceanic clearance removal that's set to take place on December 4 for Gander, Shanwick, and Bodo. And we're also joined today by a couple of folks from Shannon Tower, actually. They're going to take us through a problem that they're experiencing in their Shannon airspace, and that is CFIT and level busts. So it's a pretty much a hot topic that does affect us in the business aviation world for sure, because we seem to be, as we'll see in the statistics, we seem to be contributing a fair amount to that. So I would like to welcome, of course, Jonathan Byrne and Martin Timmons from Shannon Tower. They are joining us for this session today. So thank you, gentlemen, for that. Now, before we do get started into our presentation, I want to remind you of your controls. You guys have audio settings. If you're experiencing any audio issues, we typically find that it is something to do with the controls on your computer. We don't usually have a lot of issues with folks or with Zoom platforms. So if you do have some issues or audio problems, make sure you use your audio settings to try to correct that. And if you're still not getting it audio-wise, just send us a message in the Q&A, and we'll try to see what we can do to solve that for you. Now, speaking of the Q&A, we do ask that you guys submit your questions to us via the Q&A rather than doing the hand raise, because there are several folks in the room today, several of us. So that being the case, it'll be kind of hard to get to individual hand raises and ask questions individually. So when you do have a question, please do submit it to the Q&A, and we will address all your questions at the end of the session. That way we can get this on the recording so that you can have this for later reference on the YouTube video. Now, you do have nonverbal feedback that's available to you guys to use as well. Anytime you feel like you want to do that, feel free. Give us a thumbs up or handshake or whatever it is you think we deserve. Now, this will be recorded. It is being recorded, and we're going to have this posted for you on our YouTube channel as we normally do. That's where we keep all of our 30 West IP webcast updates, as you're familiar. So feel free, after this is done, if you're not able to hang around for the whole session, please come back and view the rest of it, or even share the link with everyone else that you know that wasn't able to join us today. So it has been a little while since we've seen you, so we want to kind of just bring you up to speed on what we've been up to. We haven't disappeared from the scene or anything like that. We've actually been quite busy. As you can see, a statement that Mitch put on our website for you to indicate what we've shifted our focus to do this year particularly, but over the last couple of years. We're making an effort to get out to the actual facilities and visit the centers and the radio facilities, everyone that's involved with you transiting through the oceanic environments. That way we can get some firsthand feedback from these folks to deliver to you, because our goal, as you can see, is to deliver to you relevant pilot-oriented operational information. And so we feel like the best way to do that is to go out and actually visit the places that you're going to be interfacing with. So over the last few months, we were actually able to make a sort of a European swing, so to speak. And we're going to finish that out in 2025 and go visit some more facilities on the European side of the NAT. But this year, I was lucky enough, and I want to say thank you, by the way, very much to AirNav Ireland for allowing me to join them at the NatOps Forum in Dublin. And during that trip, I was also allowed to go visit Shanwick Radio, as well as Shannon ACC and Shannon Tower. So I do want to say thank you to all of those facilities for allowing me to come and visit and for sharing some information with me to deliver to you. And the Shannon Tower visit, of course, turned out to be much more fruitful than I anticipated. And Mr. Byrne and Mr. Timmons have actually agreed to join me on this webinar to deliver to you the message for the CFIT and level busts at Shannon Tower. So I really appreciate that. And thank you guys for taking the time out of your day to join us. Excuse me. All right. So for me, what I'm going to do to start off with is to kind of get us started on our journey, so to speak. We'll start off with entering the Gander or the Shannon Oceanic region first, and then we'll end up at Shannon and talk with Martin and Jonathan about the CFIT and level busts at Shannon. But for the first couple of minutes, what I would like to do is just remind you of the NAT Oceanic clearance removal that is heading your way here pretty soon. So what I'm going to do is turn off my video camera so you can have more of the real estate on your screen. And again, if you have questions during this portion of it, or even the second portion, please submit your questions to the Q&A. That way we can answer those questions on the recording so that that'll be captured for us for later. All right. So with that being said, I'll turn off my video camera and we'll get on with the task at hand. If I can make this manipulation happen here. There we go. All right. So well, I tried to. There we go. Now, the NAT Oceanic clearance removal, as you guys are aware, is all the information is published for us here in the NAT Doc 007, as well as this latest NatOps Bulletin 2023-001. The NAT SPG has published guidance for us in these documents that do describe the new RCL message process for all 5 of the NAT OCAs that did previously use the Oceanic clearance request process. Now, of course, the state AIP for each of these OCAs remains your official source of information about the RCL messages. Now, currently, only Reykjavik and Santa Maria OCAs are using the new RCL process, which they did start using on 21 March 24 this year. Now, Bodo, Gander, Shanwick, they are all set to implement this on 4 December. And according to the feedback at the NatOps forum back in October, there are no anticipated delays to this. So it looks like this will be on schedule. Now, you'll notice New York, of course, is not mentioned because they're not doing the RCL message, which, they haven't done the OCL for 13 years either, so it's no surprise. Now, it's very likely, of course, that your ops manual provider has already provided updates for this information in your manual. So, of course, you should refer to your International Operations Manual to learn your approved North Atlantic operating procedures. You're also going to find this information in your JET manuals. Now, the JETs in North America or Europe Airway manuals contain the NAT Doc 007 as well as the NatOps Bulletin information. And we're going to use the North America Airway manual as our reference. Now, the requirement to obtain a separate Oceanic clearance, in addition to the current IFR clearance that you're flying on, it was unique to the NAT region. And that was due in part to the large volume of traffic they have out there and the limited surveillance technology they were able to utilize in the past. But with the advancement of modern communication, navigation, and surveillance, or CNS technologies, the NAT SPG has decided the Oceanic clearance is no longer required, and they're calling this transition process the Oceanic clearance removal. Now, although the NAT SPG is using the phrase Oceanic clearance removal, they did not truly remove the Oceanic clearance process for flight crews. The actual removal of the Oceanic clearance process has been implemented for the Oceanic Air Traffic Control Operators, or ATCOs, not for the flight crews. Now, the new term for what is essentially the same process for you, the flight crew, of course, is the RCL message. Now, even though the tasks that flight crews must perform in the cockpit prior to Oceanic entry in the NAT region are essentially the same, the process has been modified. Now, the biggest change in the new Oceanic clearance process regards how you get that root portion of the Oceanic clearance. How is that delivered to you? With the new RCL message process, you're no longer going to receive any parts of the former Oceanic clearance from the Oceanic area ATCOs or ATC operators. When the new NAT OCAs, when they move to the new RCL message process, well, then you're going to receive the root portion of your clearance on the ground at the departure airport from the local clearance delivery person using whatever clearance delivery system they use at that airport. So it's going to be like a regular IFR departure clearance used all over the planet. Now, again, you will no longer receive any clearances via ACARS or by voice comm from the Oceanic ATCOs in response to that RCL message that you send. Flight crews will continue to do the same process of sending information either via voice or via ACARS data link to the OCA the Oceanic control area, before crossing the Oceanic entry point, just like you did before with the OCL process. Now, the purpose for the RCL message is so that you can send the latest flight information in case your flight plan changed after you departed. You can send that latest flight information to the Oceanic planning controllers for the particular OCA while you first enter the NAT region. So that means you're going to continue to send a voice message or an ACARS data link RCL message well prior to reaching the OEP so that the latest flight plan information is uploaded to the planning controllers. And if you do use ACARS for this, for the data link RCL message, well, then you're going to continue to use the same function in your FMS, either Oceanic REQ request, or maybe it says Oceanic CLX clearance function. They're all essentially the same. It's an OCL function that's in your ACARS ATS system, and you're going to use that to send the new RCL message. Otherwise, if you do send the message via voice, well, then you'll just use voice like you have in the past on HF or VHF, depending on the OCA, and you're going to relay the same information. So sending the RCL message is the same airborne process for flight crews that was used for sending the OCL message. And the title of the OCL slant RCL function in your ACARS ATS FMS screen there, it's going to be the same too, in addition to the content of the message. The RCL message content has not changed from the Oceanic clearance request, and it shall include the Oceanic entry point, the estimated time of arrival at that point, your expected Mach number, the requested flight level, and the max flight level you can maintain at the Oceanic entry point. And it's important to include that max flight level, the one that you can maintain at the OEP, because ATC is going to first try to change your flight level to allow you to keep the pre-planned route. Also, if the flight level you requested is your max, that's the one you can do at the OEP, well, then list that as the max FL in the free text field of the RCL message. That will help the Oceanic planners to understand your capabilities, and they will never issue a flight level that exceeds your specified max flight level. And if you don't specify a maximum flight level, well, then ATC will assume that your requested is your max. So in that case, you could potentially limit your operation if you can, in fact, fly a higher flight level than what you requested, but you did not let ATC know what your capabilities are. Now, in this illustration, I'm showing you an RCL message with the same content items as before. As you can see, nothing's changed. Just be sure, down here in the lower left corner, be sure you let them know what is your maximum capable flight level in that remarks area or the free text area, whatever it is you have available on your particular avionics. Now, if you do use data link ACARS for submitting the RCL message, well, then the ACARS ATS system will be used only for submission of the RCL downlink message. The planning controllers for that OCA will only respond with either an acknowledgement of receipt of the RCL message or another message to indicate failure to receive the message. Or they may even send you additional messages instructing you to contact ATC via voice for negotiation or other reasons. If you submit the RCL via ACARS, and if it is successful, then the new response you will receive from the Oceanic ANSP will state RCL received by Gander or Reykjavik or whichever ANSP that you're submitting this to. Now, again, there will be no clearance information sent to you in response to your RCL message. And of course, after receipt of this confirmation, you have to acknowledge it because you got to acknowledge the CPDLC open message. Makes sense. Now, there are situations when you have to use voice to submit the RCL. It seems obvious, but if the ACARS is not installed on your airplane, well, then obviously you have to use voice. Or let's say the system's not working properly. Then the ACARS system is not working properly. You have to do it on voice. You also have to use voice if your ETA to the OEP is less than 30 minutes. Now, that is Reykjavik has an exception to that. Reykjavik doesn't want anything delivered to them any earlier than 20 minutes. And you also have to use VoiceCom instead of ACARS data link if you received an RCL rejected response from the ANSP, or if you did not receive any response at all to the RCL message within 15 minutes of sending it. So that's when voice has to be used. If the Oceanic planners need to issue an amendment to your flight plan route after you depart the airport and before you reach the OEP, well, then the amendment will be issued by domestic ATC operators using VoiceCom or by CPDLC loadable route clearance. Using CPDLC push to load capabilities, that does reduce your potential for making errors. And it also reduces your workload. So it can only be delivered via fans push to load or by voice if there is a change. Now, some of the domestic ATC centers, they have updated their IT infrastructure so that they will be able to use fans to uplink the NAT Oceanic reroute to your aircraft if necessary. But for several technical reasons, when Shanwick needs to issue a reroute to you for the NAT Oceanic route portion, well, then you will be instructed to contact Shanwick by voice on existing VHF frequencies, the same ones you use now, whereby the amendment will be delivered to you. All route changes that are issued to you or any flight after you pass an Oceanic entry point and you are operating within the NAT OCA, well, then those are going to be continue to be sent up to you as they are right now, either by CPDLC or by HF, wherever necessary. Now, regardless if you have received an amended Oceanic route clearance or if you were told to fly your current flight plan, you will still receive the confirm assigned route CPDLC message from ATC shortly after you enter their OCA. The NAT OCAs are still requiring confirmation that you have essentially all three parts of the former Oceanic clearance, which are route, speed, and altitude. And they will send that message to ensure that the active route in your FMS does align with their flight data processors. So you're still going to continue to receive this confirmation message like you currently do in the NAT region. And like before, you have to acknowledge it. So you're still going to continue to use the same process of sending the reply with your active route attached to it, the report function in your FMS, using whatever avionics you have installed in your aircraft. All right, so let's address the speed and the flight level portions of that RCL. The Oceanic planners will use the speed that you've stipulated and the flight level that you requested. That's really kind of it's a slight nuance, but that is a big change, really. You're telling them what speed you're going to hold, but you're requesting a flight level. Now, they're going to use your speed and requested level from this message, and that you have to send, of course, well before entry, to determine if there's going to be proper separation in the airspace. Now, if there are no conflicts, well, then the ATCOs will use the Mach that you specified in your RCL as the reference that you will maintain while in their OCA, Oceanic Control Area. So basically, what we're seeing is that the speed adjustment process, formerly called OWAFs, that will now be the new normal for the NAT region, unless, of course, you're assigned a fixed Mach number, excuse me, which obviously we have to do that. We understand that process. Now, of course, if you intend to change your speed by Mach 0.02 or more from the Mach that you specified in that RCL message, the downlink message, well, then you have to advise ATC of those changes. The Oceanic planners will use the requested flight level in your RCL message to determine the closest available level at that OEP that you want. Now, the Oceanic controllers will then coordinate with the domestic controllers behind the scenes to ensure that you do arrive at that planned OEP at the expected time, flight level, and speed. Now, the domestic controllers will then communicate with you to issue any vectors, climbs, descents, whatever that might be required to reach the assigned OEP and flight level. Domestic ATC will be fully responsible for issuing climbs, descents to ensure that you cross at the proper point, speed, and level. Everything's all done by them now, or it will be when this starts, and you will no longer be responsible. The flight crew will no longer be responsible to do that coordination for the controllers between the two ANSPs. Now, you got to remember, this is a big point. You do not change flight level unless you have a clearance to do so. That does include situations where you have a level change already specified in your flight plan. You do not change in level until they give you a clearance to do so. Now you do have a couple of weeks, well, let's just under actually, about 13 days left until the remaining NAT OCAs implement this clearance removal. So, you can, again, you can get a good overview of this information out of NAT.007 or NAT Ops Bulletin 2023-001. However, the member state AIPs for each of the NAT OCAs, that will be the definitive source, for their unique requirements to this general procedure. And of course, between now and then, if there are any NOTAMs that are issued or anything like that, well, we have to take that into consideration. But there hasn't been anything to indicate that there's going to be a further delay. So it does look like overnight, December 3, 4, Gander, Shanwick, Bodo, they're going to join the party, so to speak, along with Reykjavik and Santa Maria. All right, so that's the NAT Oceanic clearance removal. And, I only see one question on that unless we have some others that were answered. So if you don't mind, gentlemen, I will go ahead and answer this question before we move on to your topic. Will that be okay with you guys? All right. I'll assume that it is. Okay, there
Absolutely, Joe. Yeah.
Perfect. Excellent. So question says, can the RCL request times be standardized across the Good question. That would be nice, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. As you saw in the graphic that I was showing you, in fact, I can go ahead and pull that up. These times are still going to be kind of skewed here. So, Gander 90 to 60, Shanwick 90 to 30, Santa Maria at least 40, Bodo at least 20, Reykjavik no earlier than 20, and New York just says, don't bother us, don't call us. So whether there's going to be an effort to standardize that, I don't know, but I will let you know that there is talk. Now, this is getting out of turn a little bit, but there is talk of maybe even just doing away with this process altogether. So I don't know that they would go to a standardized timing rather than just say, we're just going to get rid of it altogether. That might be what they end up doing, but we don't have that. There is nothing that says that's actually happening. It's just talking right now. I see no place where the TMI is verified. Well, if you're getting an oceanic clearance and it's going to use one of the routes, you will read back the TMI if you don't read back the full route clearance in your standard IFR departure. That TMI value is still going to be there. And again, why can't they standardize the times before request? I don't have an answer for you, man. I wish it would be nice and standardized like that, but each ANSP has unique requirements, and so they kind of set their own standards that way. And as I've said before, if you guys have been through our training, the NAT SPG is in charge of harmonizing the area, but it's up to each ANSP to actually follow along and follow the harmonized effort. All right. So thank you for those questions. Excellent questions. I do apologize that I don't have the time values standardized for you, or the ATC wasn't able to do that. But yeah, I understand that is one of the biggest frustrations. All right. So what I'll do, let me go ahead and return to my slideshow here. Let me get back to where I was there. There we go. Now, CFIT level busts at Shannon. And I think we have a few more questions rolling in on the other topic, but we will get to those just so I can keep these gentlemen on a decent schedule. I don't want to hold them over too long. So I'm going to let Jonathan and Martin take over and walk us through the CFIT level busts at Shannon. And then we can get back and answer the remaining questions that you have in addition to any new questions after their presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and stop share. Jonathan, I'll let you take over the screen from that point. Excellent, sir. Thank you. And I will go ahead and drop my video as well.
Okay, thanks very much, Joe and Mitch, for allowing us to attend this today. It's a great opportunity to get through some of our issues, our ongoing issues we have in Shannon here. And thanks very much to all the attendees online as well. So yeah, as Joe mentioned, we have an issue with level busts in Shannon, an ongoing issue, which has been improving, but is still at a higher level than we would like. So we'd like to just go through the all of the elements that related to what's causing these level busts. And the reason we have this listed as CFID and level bust is that the potential for the level bust that we have could ultimately lead to a CFID, which is of course an extremely serious event that we want to ensure does not happen ever in Shannon. So just to give you an introduction to who we are, Jonathan Byrne is my name. I'm the head of operations at air traffic control for Shannon Airport. We conduct the tower and the approach control services here. I'll hand you over to Martin there for a minute as well to introduce himself.
Hi everyone, my name is Martin Timmins. I'm Head of Safety Management with AirNav Ireland. Previous to taking up the role as Head of Safety, I had worked with 18 years in a low fares carrier airline here in Europe as their safety manager. And prior to that, 12 years working in the military, flying helicopters. So about over 15,000 hours flying, and finished probably one of my last flights was on a 737-800, in which I was a TRE and line training captain. So, and once again, I'd just like to echo Jonathan's comments earlier on. Thank you very much for allowing us and facilitating us to get a message across to your audience. So thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Just to say, the only flying experience I have is sitting in a passenger seat. But I've 35 years of air traffic control in Ireland, Europe, and in the Middle East. And I've been the head of operations back here now since 2018. And been fighting this issue ever since. So we'll break into the PowerPoint. We'll try not to commit murder by PowerPoint presentation. We'll go through it nice and quickly and keep it simple. I'll just let you know. So the topics that we'll address going through it. First of all, we'll just ensure that we all fully understand in the same manner what a level bust and a CFID is in Ireland, where these level busts are happening, and who is level busting. The clue to that might be the fact that we're here on this webinar today. Why these level busts are happening. This is probably the most important element that we need to go through so that we can give you an understanding of why these are occurring and what we've been doing about it, and most importantly, how you can help prevent it yourselves. Okay, so the what then? What is the level bust in Ireland here? It's any unauthorized vertical deviation of more than 300 feet from an ATC flight clearance. That's the standard one, but also then within reduced vertical separation minima, or VSM airspace, this limit is reduced to 200 feet. So those are what's causing the issues for us. The next what then is the CFIT, the controlled flight into terrain. So again, that's a controlled flight into terrain. This occurs when an airworthy aircraft, under the complete control of the pilot, is inadvertently flown into terrain, water, or an obstacle. Obviously a massively serious event. The pilots are generally unaware of the danger until it is too late. That's the source from Skybury on that one as well. Okay, so we'll move to the where then. As I mentioned, we're at Shannon Airport. This is also right in the middle here. You can see in the map, right in the middle of the Wild Atlantic Way on the west coast of Ireland. This will be your first landfall after your Oceanic crossing. Beautiful but wet most of the time, but we're happy to be here and happy to have you. And so our unit then is known as the Shannon Terminal Business Unit. It's where myself and Martin work out of. And this provides the tower and approach radar services for Shannon Airport in County Clare, Ireland. Our traffic figures are on the rise again since COVID, but currently around 30,000 to 25,000 flights per year. And between 30 to 20% of that, in and around 28% is the sort of standard of all of our flights are the North American business jet community. And we are happy to have you, as I said. So if we look at this slide, a little bit tricky to see maybe, but this just shows the level busts at Shannon from October 22 to October 2024 this year. You can see the not massive numbers, but there's also no monthly or seasonal trend with them. They do just occur randomly throughout the year. Not too many, but for a relatively quiet airport, definitely higher than we want them to be. So you can see the actual figures then. 2022, we had 9 events, 2023, 13. 2 of those our air traffic controllers did have contribution to. They certainly didn't cause them, but their actions maybe didn't help prevent the level busts. And then so far this year, we've had 8 in 2024. Now, those figures are a lot lower than pre-COVID. So in 2018 and 2019, we had 18 and then 22. Then we've been doing an awful lot of work since then, and we've definitely have reduced them. But like I said, I still want to see us getting these down lower. And if you see, again, they might not sound like huge figures, but if we'll show you the next slide now, which puts it into its proper sort of review. This shows how disproportionate our figures are. So you can see down the bottom here, our 4 state, well, we have 3 state airports, and then we have our 1 ATC en route center. So Cork, Dublin, Shannon en route center, and ourselves, Shannon Airport here. This dotted line here shows the average rate. This is a rate per 100,000 flight hours. All of the other units are doing quite perfectly fine, well below the rate. And then we hit Shannon here from 2013 all the way up to current times. You can see there's been a massive difference between our rates and everybody else's. It was a lot higher. We had a drop for a while, but then it came back up again, 2018 and 2019, doing a lot of work to get them back down, and just seeing a little bit of a raise again in 2023 made us move on to getting back to a few more actions and trying to get these down as low as we can. We want to get them down just like everybody else. They should be below that line there, and that's what we're hoping to do. So yeah, as I mentioned, then we have a disproportionately high number of level busts at Shannon. And what makes them significant as well in relation to potentially being CFITs is that they are nearly all on the approach phase or are going towards the approach phase of the flight. So these level busts with potential for CFIT events then. Most of the CFIT accidents occur, as you can appreciate, in the approach and landing phase of flight. Therefore, our level busts carry a greater risk of that CFIT. And we do have some, not hugely high, but we do have some high ground around the approach, which of course escalates that risk as well. And a disproportionate number of those disproportionate level busts do actually involve the North American business jet community. This is just a little heat map here. You can see these green circles indicating where these level busts have occurred. So all of these would basically be on the approach, and all of these are turning onto the approach. So it's always in that phase when we're getting down low, getting into the approach that the incidents occur. So on the who element then, the analysis shows in relation to the percentages and proportions how we've identified that the North American business jets are disproportionately involved in these level busts. So as you can see, say from 2019 through to current times, as I mentioned, the percentage of total flights for North American business jets is in and around 30%. But the percentage of total level busts by the North American business jets is in the 60s, the 80s, the 60s. So far, 50% this year, and hopefully that'll remain low. But clearly, the level bust percentage is significantly higher than the actual flight percentage. So we would like to try and get that down if we can. What we have identified is plenty of reasons why this is happening, specifically for the North American business jets. So the first 2 are probably the most significant, and it would be failure to select hectopascals instead of inches of mercury. Obviously, you're used to working in inches of mercury in the US, and it would seem sometimes the transition across the ocean, the pilots are just forgetting to make that switch to hectopascals, which is, of course, absolutely required. Another thing that does happen quite regularly is a late an early or no change to the local QNH setting. And that's primarily due to the discrepancy between your own trans altitude in the US of 18,000 feet compared to the Shannon trans altitude of 5,000 feet. Obviously, a massive difference. And, you know, if you are used to hitting your transition at such a higher level, that can obviously lead to a difference in the way it's managed. And that has definitely contributed to these level busts. Other elements that are maybe not quite as significant, but they do certainly contribute to these late descent profiles. Particularly, you know, if you're coming down fast, often little elements do get forgotten because, you know, you're just going too fast and the workload gets focused on that speed of descent. Pilot fatigue and increased workload after the Oceanic trip. That is a long journey over the ocean. Even sitting as a passenger, I find it tiring, let alone actually flying across. And then, you know, there is all the focus and the workload then is on that landing phase. So again, elements can be forgotten. And unfamiliarity with the airspace. I'm aware that a lot of the business jet community might be arriving in Shannon for the first or second time, perhaps. And usually also when they're landing here, it's really just for a refuel basis. And they might, the final destination might be in Central Europe somewhere. So they can be kind of task focused about where they're going next. And yeah, so that's the lack of focus due to the forward planning. So those are elements that we have we first of all were assuming and trying to gather data to ensure that these were correct, but we have received a lot of reports from the pilots post-event as well that have identified that yes, we were corrected in these assumptions, and these are the issues that are causing these problems. So what have we done about that, and what are we continuing to do, I guess? We've had a lot of actions through various different avenues, operational and procedural initiatives. So we did put together a level bus prevention working group with multiple stakeholders from here and from different areas, with the regulators and the airport operators, and came up with some very good processes and procedures to drive things forward. We improved our ILS coverage map as well, because back in the day, that was also a bit of an issue where the ILS coverage wasn't significant enough, so that was causing issues itself. We've focused on how we issue and get readbacks and hearbacks on the issuing of the QNH. And all of the level bust events have a deep dive investigations, which Martin's team manages really well. And the data they've gotten out of that has been fantastically helpful over the years. So technological solutions. We have improved, like I say, the likes of the ILS coverage map and various others. But one big improvement that will be coming in 2025 is the pressure advisory tool on our Coupons radar system. So basically what will happen is the controller will get a yellow warning of any flight that has incorrectly selected the incorrect pressure setting. So that will be massively helpful to our controllers here to prevent those level busts from happening, and certainly from preventing CFITs. But it still won't stop the pilot from making the error. So, you know, if we can stop this at that stage, that's even better. Then there's nothing going to happen. But at least this one gives us an extra safety barrier to prevent that level bust, or even the level bust becoming a CFIT, which will be really awful, of course. Okay, so other things that we've done is communication and promotion. We've put together briefing packs that are given to the pilots when they arrive here, just to remind them about the level bust issues and how best to prevent it. We've had multiple meetings and presentations with the NBAA, put some articles out as well. And obviously here we are today with 30 West IP, which is a fantastic opportunity for us as well. This is, I think, a really good forum, and getting to talk to the right people is really important. We've conducted several safety surveys with our traffic controllers here as well, because nobody knows better than the operational ATCOs here of how to manage these and how to prevent them becoming more serious events than they need to be. So they've come up with great suggestions as well. And we've added that into the ATCO training. We do it yearly in our current training. We've also, the ATCOs basically put together a best practice document for how we operate as controllers here to avoid these events. So just to give you a little breakdown of some of the highlights of that best practice document. So we have to be alert to the aircraft origin. I don't want to sound biased, but we are always aware when there's a North American business jet coming in, particularly from across the ocean. We're aware that there's the fatigue element and potentially the unfamiliarity element, and that there is a trend for these level busts. So as soon as we see a North American business jet coming, we prepare for that and are very, very focused on ensuring that the QNH is delivered correctly and read back correctly, et cetera, et cetera. So we also, just to remind controllers and yourselves, low pressure, that equals high risk, because if there's an error in the QNH and a low pressure situation, then we have a massive altitude change, and that of course can make it into the most serious scenario possible. So the issuing of the QNH then, every controller will issue the QNH with 4 digits, hectopascals, and will insist on a full readback, including hectopascals, that must be received every time. Now, that doesn't mean that we haven't had events where the QNH has been issued correctly and it has been read back correctly, including hectopascals, and a level bust occurred. And then the pilot advised, yes, apologies, I did read that back correctly, but I forgot to switch to hectopascals. So ideally, that's when you switch. When, if you haven't switched, you should be looking at your monitor the whole time to ensure that what you're saying is correct. We refrain from issuing local QNH on first contact as well, because of the discrepancy in, between 18,000 feet and 5,000 feet, it would be quite understandable if you heard the local QNH at a higher level and you would just switch automatically to that QNH, which again would cause a level bust. So we wait until we're getting closer to that transition level altitude before we issue the local QNH. We will do, depending on the busyness of the scenario, we'll consider altitude checks during the descent, particularly in these if the descent is going quickly. And then we'll consider descent to the trans level first, and then altitude when approaching. Though these sort of stepped approaches are not always possible because, that slows things down and busies up the frequency. So if in the quieter scenarios, they will do these elements, but not always. And then just a reminder as well, red flags. So if a pilot reads back an altitude read back when cleared to a flight level, that's likely to have indicated that he's switched early to the local QNH passing flight level 180. So that will always be questioned if we get an altitude read back to confirm that he's still on flight levels and not altitudes. Okay, so I'll hand you over to Martin then to discuss some of the events that we've gone through and the data that have come out of that. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. And just to reiterate to the audience as well, as safety manager for AirNav Ireland, what I look at is strategic risk in the organisation, and what are those kind of key performance indicators do we have. And one of them will be level bus, and then we drill it down into tactical risks by unit and by operation, and we look through our safety management system of how we mitigate the risk and how we reduce that risk. And part of any effective SMS is basically one of the key components of it is safety communications. And by attending at this, we're using this as a way of sharing information and communicating the risk that we have identified to other people so that they may be able to instill it in their organizations. So once again, thank you very much for facilitating this. It's interesting, just on the slide pack, when you go back over it again, on slide 5, you'll see in the background of the CFIT event, or near CFIT event that occurred in France on the 22nd of April 2022 in Charles de Gaulle. In that event, the air traffic controllers gave the wrong QNH setting to the flight crew. The QNH on the day was 1001, but the QNH that was given by successive controllers was 1011 hectopascals. That's only a difference of 10 hectopascals. But the end result of that was the crew initiating a terrain escape maneuver at 6 feet. So if you're ever interested in reading about how these things can impact and lead to a near CFID accident, it's a very interesting report to read. From our point of view, we've never got that close, but these are all leading indicators for us, or lagging indicators, and that's why we want to get the message out. Sorry, Jonathan, if you just carry on there with the two messages there. All right, so what are we seeing? We're seeing a failure to set the appropriate barometric settings, pressure altitudes passing through the transition level or transition altitude. I know for American operators coming from America, it's very nice. Your transition altitude is specified throughout the country. It's 18,000 feet. When you fly into Europe, Shannon might be different to London. London might be different to Madrid, and Madrid might be different to Munich. So there's very transition altitudes within Europe. I know previously there has been some work done on standardizing that throughout Europe, but so far to date, that has not changed. So that is the risk. You guys are coming into Europe. You're now coming into an area where 18,000 feet is no longer applicable, and each country or each airport may have different transition altitudes. Thank you for that, Jonathan. If you go on to the next slide. So I'm going to go through two events and kind of give you an idea about it. You saw the pictures Jonathan put up of where Shannon is. It's on the west coast of Ireland. Typically, a lot of corporate jets that arrive into Shannon are typically coming in the early hours of the morning, at late at night, in the period of the window of circadian low between around midnight and 4 o'clock in the morning, our time. But in and around that time, we've seen a correlation, and that's why Jonathan is is highlighting the event, or fatigue may be a contributor. But just when you look at the map and the terrain around Shannon, it's up to a minimum sector altitude of about 4,000 feet. So it is quite high ground when you come in and go onto the westerly runway of runway 24. So this event occurred in 2019. A North American business jet came within 2 nautical miles of 500 feet of ground while attempting to establish on an approach for runway 24. When cleared to 3,000 feet on the QNH, and the QNH on that day was 988, the aircraft ascended to 2,300 feet. That is the radar indicator there on the right-hand side from the Coupang system. And you also heard Jonathan highlight that part of the upgrade, which will cost us as an organization a significant amount of money, is to get the subscale setting. So we not only will we see what flight level you've set or altitude you've set, we'll also see what's set on your subscale setting. So whether you've set inches of mercury, whether you've set QNH, or whether you have left it on standard QNH. So if you go on to the next page, or next slide, please, Jonathan. Now, when we do the maths on it, we came up with 2 likely causal factors, because we will never go and interview the crew unless they come back to us and say, look, hands up, I forgot to set the QNH. So there are 2 likely causes here. First of all was failure to switch to local QNH. At the time was 988. And if we do the maths on this, 988 taken away from 1013. So if the crew left it on standard, that would be a difference of 25 hectopascals, which equates to 750 feet. Or alternatively, they could have incorrectly set 2988 inches instead of 988 hectopascals, which then would have led to a difference of 24 hectopascals, resulting in a 720 foot altitude difference. So even though the altimeter in their aircraft was telling them they were at 3,000 feet, in reality, they were down at 2,300 feet, within 500 feet of the high terrain on the westerly approach. Next slide, please, Jonathan. So what have we learned? As I said, Jonathan has already put up a number of mitigations we've put in, but another area we specifically look at from a strategic level, and not looking at just Shannon, but looking at Dublin and other airports we provide air traffic services. We look at effective air-ground communications, especially in terms of phraseology. So are our air traffic controllers using the correct phraseology in accordance with PANOPS 4444 and European regulations, and the importance of cross-checking and process and read back, hear back errors. So every event or incident or report that we analyze and we check back on tapes, we do ad hoc inspections and audits to make sure that our controllers are giving you the best service, and also that we're not inducing incorrect procedures on your behalf through phraseology. So I just wanted to put that in as another area we're focusing on strategically. And this is another event in 2022. This occurred in April, and the time of the event was at 20 to 1 local time. And the area that happened in is north of Gillog. So if you're flying into Shannon coming from the west and you're using the westerly approach, you'll come in over this point called Gillog, where you can see the MSA coming in this area is 3,000 to 3,400 feet. And if you select the next one, oh, sorry, it's jumped there. Jonathan, if you could put it back into center mode.
What's going wrong there?
Well, look, you can just leave it there like that, Jonathan. If you see there, you can see that he was told to maintain 4,000 feet, but the aircraft actually descended to 3,300 feet on the QNH. So he was indicating 4,000 feet on his PFD, or primary flight display. Sorry, yeah.
Just restart that. Sorry, Martin.
No problem.
We'll get there again very soon. Sorry, guys.
And you can go on to the next slide then, Jonathan. Thank you. Okay, so we investigated the event, we did the analysis on it again, and we looked at the playback and the various tapes. So the QNH on the night was 987. And the flight crew, in fact, on this evening told us that they had set a inches of mercury at 29.87. So they raised their hand. They said, okay, guys, our error, we set inches of mercury rather than setting the correct QNH of 987. So the altimeter was actually indicating 4,000 feet, but they were actually 3,300 feet, which then sent alerts to our air traffic controllers here in Shannon. Next slide then, please, Jonathan. This is, if you just hit the button twice, Jonathan, it should just highlight, yeah, or just there, yeah. So this was the aircraft I'm used to flying, which is 737-800. We have two subscale settings there that you can select on your instrument flight panel. One is 29.82 inches of mercury, so that's what it'll look like if you're flying in America. And then when you come to Europe, then subscale setting, we have 1024 there, hectopascals. For us on 737-800s, it's just a matter of just pressing a button on the EFIS panel. You have it pre-selected. However, through talking with corporate operations, looking at other aircraft, that's not always the way. It's programmed in different ways. So it's probably not as intuitive. And it just takes a little bit of headspace just to make sure that you put it in correctly. And I think, Jonathan, that's about my last slide, I think, if I'm correct. So I suppose we put up this message, Jonathan, here, how we can help you.
Yeah, and yeah, also how you can help yourselves. So it's about remembering elements of this. I suppose that Shannon is a level bus hotspot. So just try to maintain vigilance and follow the instructions from ATC, as ATC are very experienced in ensuring ensuring we put in mitigations against these. So if the instructions are just followed correctly, it should be pretty safe. And remember that in the low pressure scenarios, we're definitely then in a high risk scenario. So if there is an error, it can have a big impact. And that difference we mentioned between the trans altitude in the US and Ireland, and as Martin said as well, you'll have that same problem going across Europe. There might be different trans altitudes everywhere. But for this particular event, when you're coming off the ocean into Ireland, you've got to remember we're going from 18,000 feet to 5,000 feet for that transition altitude. And that we have to be on hectopascals, not inches of mercury. So I think a potential solution for the operators is to consider your SOPs. Something that we've highlighted before in an article was suggestions basically for those SOPs. So number one would be changing to hectopascals prior to entering controlled airspace. And I think actually the name of Joe and Mitch's operation here is very relevant. 30 West IP. If you wanted to make your SOPs that at 30 West we switch from inches to hectopascals, that could be a simple solution. So remember the 30 West IP are here, that's 30 West is when we switch. So the use of challenge and response procedures between the pilot monitoring and the pilot flying. So yeah, ask each other, make sure that we're correct. We have had incidents where we've been told post-event that one had switched to hectopascals and the other hadn't. And another incident where one had switched to local and the other hadn't. And so there was a misunderstanding, and so there was a level bust. Remind us again of the difference between the US and the European transition levels, again, during your flight, to have that as a conversational item. Again, you might decide on when to do that. It could again be at 30 West. We've just, something keeps going wrong with this, sorry. I'll try that again there now. Okay. And completing full readbacks, including the unit of measurement, i.e. hectopascals, when issued QNH by ATC, and verifying the unit of measurement when issued a clearance by looking at the altimeter. So when you are reading back that hectopascals, look at your altimeter and just be sure that your altimeter is saying the same as you're saying. And then notifying ATC immediately of any error or delay in proper altimeter settings. And yeah, please don't hesitate. Also, it's not mentioned here though, but if you have any doubt as to what the instruction was, just come back and ask them to repeat it. And look, that would be pretty much it from an SOP perspective and from our own perspective. So happy to take any questions, and thanks again for your time, everybody.
Excellent. Appreciate that, Jonathan and Martin. That was an excellent presentation. Thank you guys for taking the time to do that. We actually do have a handful of questions, so I like seeing that, and we get some nice positive feedback there too. So that's great. Thank you all the attendees. Thanks to everyone who's hanging out with us for this too. So we appreciate all the involvement. I'll start with the list of questions and just go through them, as they were submitted in order. The first couple are dealing with the RCL, so I'll try to field these best I can. And then I'll let you guys, you can maintain the screen control if you like, Jonathan, if you need to go back to any slides or anything like that for these questions.
Okay.
First question was, why do we still have to send RCL message before the OEP if the Oceanic clearance will be issued on the ground? And we had one of our friends actually jump in for us. So Captain Thorpe, thank you very much for that. And good to see you online with us. So good to see you, man. Haven't seen you in a while. All right. So Captain Thorpe wrote back saying, and I like it. It's a good response. So I'm going to go ahead and use his response. Think of the RCL as a stated intention. And that's an excellent way to put that. This is what we're intending to do. Keep in mind, of course, as I was saying, the requested flight level is kind of a request. But it is the same as Steve says, it's the same exchange, just in a different format as what happens when you enter New York or Oakland and they ask you, say, requested speed and flight level. when you coast out from US east or west coasts. So that is, that's an excellent way to respond to that. It is just letting the oceanic controllers know what your intentions are. And if you had any changes to your proposed oceanic route, or what they like to refer to, controllers like to refer to it as profiles, as your oceanic profile is going to change. If that is, then that's why they want that information ahead of time. All right, so thank you for that reply there, Steve. I'll go ahead and call that one done. Next question: when it comes to indicated Mach and true Mach technique, as long as you're within 0.02, there's no need to adjust. Well, when you say no need to adjust, are you meaning no need to advise ATC? If that's the case, then it's slightly off. 0.02 is when you have to advise ATC, or 10 knots off your true is when you have to advise ATC. So as I like to say, even though you couldn't set it, but this is just a theoretical, you get 0.019 for free, right? You can go up and down 0.019 all you want, and you don't have to tell ATC. And in fact, I've had feedback from Gander particularly saying, do not tell us, because we don't want it. We don't want to hear it. So don't tell ATC when you're varying by less than 0.02. But when you do get to that 0.02, that's when you have to let them know. So if I understood that to be your question, that is the answer I will give on that. Okie dokie, gentlemen, this might be for you. And some of these kind of are a little bit rhetorical, but they're still good curiosity questions. One, why doesn't AirNav Ireland or Europe just use flight level 180 for a transition altitude? Do you happen to have any feedback on that?
Yeah, that is quite a common question, actually. There has been discussions before across Europe about, not necessarily about 180, but about a common transition altitude. However, agreement was never reached. And the problem is, we would need everybody to change together to make it doable and to make it efficient. But there's never been that agreement, unfortunately. And it's a challenging thing. They're all, they're all separate countries. It's not, I can imagine it can be hard enough to get all US states to agree on certain scenarios. And imagine if they were all their own countries. So yeah, it's tricky.
That's kind of what I usually say when I address ICAO in general. It's a great organization, but the problem is there are 193 different countries that are members. So you're not going to get 193 different countries to agree to do everything the same way.
Very right, yes. And the EASA in the same respect then as well, all the European countries, they have their own sovereign airspace and they don't necessarily want to cooperate terribly well together sometimes.
Yes, true, and unfortunate. Next question, Ryan asks, do we have data on aircraft types and or time of day and duty period for the US aircraft? And I'm
so I don't have the data currently with me there, but one of the questions that previously came up and was raised as a potential concern was, would these be single pilot operations? Would that be an element that was adding to this? And it turned out, no, it wasn't. All of the aircraft that we had, they were all dual pilot flying, but it's pretty much every North American business jet type has level busted. And now, just to highlight as well, it's not just the North American business jets. Our next highest contributor is US military. And then our next highest contributor are US airlines. So it's all aircraft types really that are doing it.
But the common theme is US based.
I'm afraid so. Yes.
All right. Next question, anonymous. Is there an Irish or EASA version of the US's ASRS, Aviation Safety Reporting System, to report these level bust events? So are you familiar with ASRS on the FAA side?
Is that a size one, or is it?
I think that'd be the same as ECARS, would it?
Yeah, e-cars. Yeah, so there is a reporting portal. Yeah, e-cars. So basically, every organization will submit the report to it. But EASA do have their own reporting portal that facilitates you filing a report there, if that's the question, whether somebody wants to file a report there. If it occurred in Irish jurisdiction, Irish Aviation Authority have a reporting portal as well.
Okay. And I assume that these are easily findable, using a search engine of some sort.
Yeah, yeah, they
Okay,
are.
excellent. All right, that one is answered. Moving on to the next one. Possible, AJ is asking, possible pre-departure clearance sooner with what procedure? Same for arrivals. A lot sooner would help the inbound load in FMS. I apologize, AJ. I'm having a little difficulty understanding the question. I'll read it again if someone else might be able to understand that or can give me some help on this. Possible pre-departure clearance sooner with what procedure? Same for arrivals. A lot sooner would help with the inbound to load in the FMS. I
I
see.
think what he's suggesting is if you got it 30 minutes prior to departure, it would be much more helpful than getting it 10 minutes prior to departure.
Excellent. That's where I kind of arrived at the second reading there. Yeah, I think it would be, obviously, the more time you get, the better. So, obviously each ATC unit is going to be slightly different. That's why we like to suggest, especially on the inbound side of things, you don't wait till the top of descent to start reviewing things. You do this 2 or 3 days ahead of time, and that way you can be familiar with, and historically take a look at what the weather's been over the last few days and what runways have been favored, and then kind of narrow it down to those, and then you'll at least have those primed. And then when you do go to load in the FMS in that last 30 minutes or 10 minutes window, you'll at least have a leg up on what you're reading currently. But as far as it's kind of like what Jonathan was just saying. Each ANSP has got their own domain, and they're going to set their own kind of time limits and ways that they do things. So getting everybody to submit, give you information ahead of time is going to be kind of a tall task, so to speak. John's got several. So start off with this first one. Have you considered including a reminder to select hectopascals and or providing barometric pressure in inches of mercury in the ATIS or when first contact with ATC at coast in?
Absolutely, we have actually. So the ATIS wouldn't really work out, but something that we are reviewing at the moment is, and so this would be the responsibility of the en route center to deliver this information because they would be the first contact with somebody coming across the ocean. But yeah, I've specifically asked for that to be considered as on first contact to ensure that they're switching to hectopascals because yeah, if you're in the approach phase or the landing phase, or you're getting ready to descend, you're busy. Your workload is focused as well, so you might forget that. But if you're just coming in off the ocean, you're still in level flight, and your first contact with ATC, that might be a better place for that to be issued. So the en route center are looking at what's the impact on the controller workload, etc. for that, and possibly implementing it by CPDLC instead. But it's under consideration for the moment. I'm glad to hear that somebody agrees with me that is a good route to take. So it is under consideration, and hopefully that will become a process.
Excellent. Thank you for that. These questions are shifting, so it looks like maybe they're getting voted up perhaps, but AJ, I think this might have been a follow-up to AJ's question about sending, getting the clearance information earlier, the PDC earlier, or receiving the arrival earlier. He does state that Shannon in particular are awesome, and they usually note when we ask, they will do. So compliment to you, gentlemen.
That's very nice to hear. That's great.
Excellent. Good deal. Thank you for that, AJ. Mike is asking, does anyone know how to get that report? Now, Mike, I'm unsure what report it is exactly that you're referring to. If you want to type in another quick response and let us know, we'll try to narrow it down. But I think this was during the presentation about 15 minutes ago, John, when I think Martin was talking about
if you look up Charles de Gaulle 2022 You should find it there, but I'll see can I find it, Joe? I'll see can I find a link because
Okay.
we once the investigation report was complete, we would have distributed that to all our ATCOs for learning experiences from it because there was some really good recommendations and findings out of it.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. This isn't a question yet, but I do see Tom Lang, you have your hand raised. If you would like to ask a question, please do type it into the Q&A, and then we'll get your question answered on the air, so to speak. John, another one says, most avionics typically nag us to change the baro setting at 18,000 feet. And we have to ignore this warning or message until the transition level. We had a couple of replies to it. One was, David says you can change it in the FMS in Honeywell, which I was going to suggest. And Matt says likewise in the Garmin 5000. So there is a way where you can tell the FMS what is the transition level so that it doesn't keep flashing at you like that. So that's in your avionics package typically. Oh, there's 4 actually. There's several. Nick says Primus, Epic, Dassault, Easy, same, as well as Collins. So I think more people are chiming in that, yeah, you do have the ability to change that in your FMS. Excellent. Thank you all for the replies too. Martin is typing an answer already. So great, Martin, to the question John asks, who decides your transition level and why so low? Why 5,000? And I see Martin is typing already. So.
I'll let Jonathan go first.
Okay.
Well, yeah, so that's pretty historical, I suppose, at this stage, and it would be really the choice to make a change to that would be our regulators, and there has been conversations and discussions periodically over the years between the European regulators about changing and aligning trans altitudes, but without much fruit, unfortunately.
And why it's so low is normally because of the terrain, Jonathan, isn't it? So if you're flying into Madrid, it'll be up at around 10,000 feet, which is closer to the FAA or American rules.
Okay, excellent.
So, and that's sort of part of the issue as well, I suppose. Yeah, like every country over the years have decided on what's their safest trans altitude, as Martin says, to do with terrain and whatever else environmental elements that they have. So, everyone is kind of reluctant to change their own environmental setup, particularly maybe just to facilitate the reduction of level busts at a small airport in Ireland. They're not all going to change their operations for that, So, yeah, that's where we are with that, unfortunately.
Very good. I do see that, Martin, you are answering questions as well. So I'm going to kind of go back and try to answer some of these on the radio or on the air so that we can get this on the recording. But Steve did chime in. If you guys go into the answered questions, you can see that Steve provided a couple of links. You were asking about, somebody was asking, does anyone know how to get that report? Mike was asking that. So Steve has given you a couple of links in response to your question. So that would be good to see. Possible to get pre-departure clearance sooner and same for arrivals. Can we get it a lot sooner? Steve mentioned that he did mention this to the European Air Traffic Control representatives during the last IOC, and they looked at him as if he had 3 heads. So I think that's probably a no. Very good, Steve. Thanks for that. And let's see, Martin did answer this question. Who decides your transition level and why so low? You guys put that on the air already. So I will go ahead and leave that one, but you did type in it. It's our IAA, of course. Another one, Martin, it says, Martin said they would not interview the crew after the level busts or near CFIT. Why not? In the US, the pilot would certainly be issued a landline to call. The response is, and the next question is license action taken in some of these level busts? Martin replies, under our just culture policy, we do not contact crews as we would consider it a stressor to crew and could impact on the next leg. So very nice.
So just to add a little to that,
yeah, please.
There is engagement with the crew. So normally, in an approach situation where the crew level bust on landing, normally the SMC controller, the surface movement controller, will ask for any details that the pilot might want to share. What has really changed and improved over the last few years actually is the amount of information that the pilots do provide, which is great and really helpful. But yeah, they're not then, there isn't a massive attack or anything like that done whatsoever from major interviews or anything like that. We'll just try and get the details that the pilot might be willing to share, and that's sufficient then for getting our data and figuring out what we can do about it.
Excellent. And John asked, did I hear correctly? ATC can tell what altimeter setting we're dialing in the cockpit, and we had several replies. Eric says, and if you have hectopascals versus inches. Martin Timmons says, correct. Our system upgrade will permit us to view subscale settings. So they're going to be able to see what you have in your Colesman. Steve replies, because MODES transponders are required in Europe, they see a lot, which they do, and your indicated airspeed as well, not just your ground speed. Matt says, reference the globe.absbexchange.com. You can see what values are set. And then Eric says, in the US too, they can see this information. Okie dokie, I'll go back to the questions on the list here. Have you looked at the training of the crews that had the level busts? Did they have international training? What was the level of experience of the crew? How many crossings did they have?
Yeah, that we wouldn't be able to get official information on that. But yeah, having talked to the FAA about some of these incidents, we are aware that there doesn't seem to be regulatory requirements about international training. And at a previous conference, quite a few pilots admitted to us as well that, look, we don't actually have any international training because we weren't required, we haven't done it, and now we see the hole that's missing, that we just didn't know enough about the operation outside of the US. So it does seem to be education and awareness of the difference in the airspace does seem to be an issue.
Excellent. Kyle says, hats off to Shannon controllers who have been very good ensuring we've been set up for success. Thank you. So that was, and several people, there's another upvote to that. So you've had several upvotes to that one. So thanks for that feedback. Brian asks, will operators provide Oceanic RCL to Shanwick on the ground in Shannon at Shannon Airport after December 4? Well, that goes back to essentially the rules are going to stay the same for you guys, as my understanding there, Jonathan, as we said, RCL gets submitted. Well, if you're departing from an airport less than 30 minutes, you submit the RCL on the ground. But if you're not departing from an airport that is less than 30 minutes, then you get airborne and you submit your RCL while airborne. I assume that is still going to be the same process for you guys at Shannon Tower.
That's correct, yeah. But yeah, we kind of have less engagement with it from an ATC perspective. It's kind of, yeah, it's more on the pilot now. So.
And just a little more feedback on that bill. This came from another gentleman that I was on tour with at Shannon Tower. And I asked the question about the 30-minute thing, getting clearances on the ground. And the response was, well, we changed it to less than 30 minutes for the sole for this particular purpose. There is no airplane that can make it from Shannon Airport to the OEP in less than 30 minutes. So everybody will be airborne and do your RCL while airborne.
It removes one layer as well, so it's a more direct, you should be getting it straight back, and there's no layers there. So
excellent. No middleman to go through.
Yeah.
Excellent. Jerry says, thanks so much for the presentation. Jonathan and Martin, thank you for taking your time to present this information. Great job. 2 exclamation points.
Thank you very much. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. And we do really appreciate you guys coming to do this. Mike says that they mentioned on altimeter. So Mike, I got to go back and look it up. So I know I asked you to type that in. They mentioned it on altimeter settings. Let me go back and figure out what that was referring to.
Yeah, I think that goes back to where we'd be able to see what the subscale setting is.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. John says hectopascal reminder should be a CPDLC message that is automated when you're coasting in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, as I say, yeah, there's those two elements that we're looking at either on CPDLC or on first contact. I would kind of lean slightly more towards the first contact because I feel voice engagement people are a little bit more focused potentially. But yeah, either or I think would be a positive barrier for sure.
Excellent. And Mike, yep, it sounds like we got it. Good. Thank you. Ed, perfect. Ed, good to see you, man. Ed's our guy in the sky, so to speak. So Ed has provided you guys with a link to flightsafety.org. It is the Charles de Gaulle report. So those are right there, and the open questions. I'll just leave that there, the link for that Ed provided. I'll just leave that in the open questions for you guys. Hey Val, good to see you again. Val says changing that is usually in the defaults in several types of SMSs. Okay, so he's referring to the transition level reminder. Excellent, thanks Val. Martin, hey, good to see you too, Martin. Thanks for the brief. It was very informative and appreciated as always. I have to drop now. Cheers. Well, sorry I missed that, Martin. You've been gone for about 7 minutes, but thank you for that. And then John says, thanks, great presentation. So those are the questions that we have. Unless there were some other comments in the answered fields, I don't see anything else. So let's see. Yeah, that was it. So with that being said, thank you all for taking the time to come join us today. We really appreciate you. And if you do have any recommendations or requests for future webcasts, don't hesitate to reach out. Let us know. We're always looking to try to keep you guys informed. And rather than just giving you a bunch of repeated nonsense, we're just going to make these webcasts when there is something that is obviously of substantial interest. All right, excellent. Thank you all, and Martin and Jonathan, thank you guys. I can see the sun has already set and dinner is probably cold, so we appreciate you guys taking the time and spending the extra a couple hours at the end of your day with us. So this has been a great presentation, and once again, for everybody that has attended or viewing this in the future, we do appreciate you guys here at 30 West IP. Mitch, Dorothy, Terry, Ed, everybody says thank you. And Martin and Jonathan, thank you guys sincerely.
Thank you very much, everybody at 30 West and everybody for attending today. It's been really great. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You guys all take care, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers. Bye.